Hello, I'm Jonathan Block. In this video, I'll be doing some sound-on-sound looping, Frippertronics-style, using the Boss RE-202 Space Echo in long delay mode, and the modern digital Mellotron. The signal chain is a Mellotron M4000D Mini. Its master mono analog output goes into a Boss volume pedal that I have on the floor. The output from the volume pedal goes into a JHSAB switch to switch between two inputs, although I don't have two inputs today, it's just the Mellotron. The output from that switch goes into a Boss GT1000core multi-effects. The stereo output from the GT1000core goes into the Boss RE-202 Space Echo. And the stereo output from the Space Echo goes into a Universal Audio Volt 276 interface that communicates back and forth with the iPad Pro. I'm running GarageBand just to essentially as a tape recorder because this is a hardware jam. I'll use some mastering effects at the end, but for our purposes, again, it's really just a hardware jam using the effects from the Boss GT1000core. So this is sound-on-sound looping, using the Boss RE-202 Space Echo, which you can get into long delay mode of 6 seconds. I will have a link down below to a video where I go into the in-depth process of doing that, and then how to use this for sound-on-sound looping. I say Frippertronics style because that was between 5 and 6 seconds, and I have this set to 6 seconds. And so it's really in the same area, same kind of principle. The sounds overlap, then they fade out. This is not a Revox tape deck. This does not really sound like Frippertronics, even with a guitar. It has its own quality and its own characteristics, which I kind of find cool. But what you'll find is that over time, pretty quickly, not only does the volume of the sound go down, but it gets some compression, it gets a very mid-range woody sound, and particularly with keyboards, it really kind of starts to make these otherworldly sounds. So I highly recommend checking it out if you haven't already. As the sound source, we're using my modern Mellotron. I'll be using Chamberlin M1 sounds. So the Chamberlain M1 came out in 1970. I'm not going to get into the whole Mellotron Chamberlain history, but suffice it to say the Chamberlain was the original instrument. The Mellotron is a ripoff. Most of the tapes that the Mellotron used were Chamberlain tapes that they licensed. The Chamberlain tapes were all recorded in studios with very high quality microphones, and successive generations for the Mellotron, that's what kind of gives you that classic wow and flutter warbly Mellotron sound. The hardware was definitely less reliable than the Chamberlain, and the original Mellotron tapes, if they weren't licensing them from Chamberlain and copying them and degrading the quality that way, their tapes were not as high quality. So be that as it may, the sounds are very similar because there's a lot of cross-pollination between the instruments. So why don't we start first by just sampling some of the sounds that I'm going to use. I'm not going to use, I am actually going to pretty much use every sound on here, but I don't want to spend a lot of time going through it, so I'll just go through a few. We've got a cello, a female solo voice, accordion, we got a bassoon, tenor sax, oboe. So I'll be using the oboe as a solo instrument, so all those other ones I played before I'll be creating the first loop with, and then I'll do some oboe soloing over that. Then I'll start adding the oboe to the loop, which will have started to fade pretty much, and we'll build from there. French horn, trumpet, you get the idea. Organ, couple of organs. And there's a harpsichord, electric and acoustic. Marimba, okay, so I'm pretty much going through all the sounds. But now that I've gotten here, these are those Chamberlin Mellotron sounds where you hold the note and then you get some trills. We've got vibraphone. So that's just the vibraphone, no trilling. Mandolin, again, we'll get some trills. So typically these, I'll use these actually in the loop, this one and the marimba. But what I may do is, there's a low-high switch on the Mellotron that halves the sample rate, so it slows it down. And for these trilly things, it actually sounds pretty cool low. And then the mandolin would sound like this, same notes. So we'll see what we can do with those. Steel guitar, I may use this as a solo for that kind of marimba, the marimba mandolin part of the loop, depending how that sounds. Okay, you get that. And then finally, I'm going to end it with this. This is a great sound. It's called Harp Long Arpeggio. So I'll make a loop of that and we'll see what happens. I've also got, so those were the clean sounds, no effects. I've got some effects here too. I'm not going to play everything again, but let's start out at the cello. So my standard Mellotron kind of patch thing always has a phaser, always has a delay, which I can turn on and off, but compression and reverb are always on. So there's always a little bit of compression here to control and kind of tame the high peaks, and just a little bit of reverb to make it sound bigger, right? I've also got, in this particular patch, Boss's overtone sound, which actually is working out really well with the Mellotron. I kind of happened on this a few weeks ago. So here's the cello with the Boss overtone sound. They actually make this as a pedal too. So let me turn it off. So it's kind of adding those overtones. Let's add the phaser. A little swirling there. And then the reverb, excuse me, the delay. Let's try a different sound here. So the female solo voice, this is clean. All right, let's just go through them each. So here's the overtone. Back on. Phaser. And delay. All of them. Totally almost sounds like a different thing. Let me just go to the oboe. Turn that off. So this is phaser and delay. So you get the idea. So I'll be going and using multiple combinations of the different effects. And you'll hear how once the sounds start looping and you start hearing that smearing, and again, the volume goes down, you get that compression and this hollow, woody sound, and particularly with instruments with effects, you'll still hear, like for instance, you could still tell this is an oboe in back there, or at least some kind of horn. Turn the overtone on, no doubt, right? But once all those instruments, particularly when I'm using effects, just start to, I don't want to say muddy up, because it doesn't do that. It almost creates an entirely new sound. And that's actually why I keep doing these videos and using the Boss, because there's nothing else that will get you sound-on-sound looping like this device. Again, this is Frippertronics-style sound-on-sound looping, where you're adding sounds, but they don't last forever. They fade out over time. If you don't want the volume to decrease and you don't want the quality of the sound to degrade, then you really just want to use a looper, a traditional looper with what you put in is what you get out. This is completely different. All right, enough of my yapping here. So what I'm going to do right now is just demonstrate a short loop, and we'll see how just a few of the different sounds, and I'll get up to the oboe and we'll do some soloing, just so you can hear really how, once you get this set up, and again, there's a link down below to a video, and I've got tips and tricks, you save it to a preset and you really don't have to go back. So I've got this on preset 4. Anytime I want to do the sound on sound looping, I've got it set up. You can use the intensity knob to control the feedback or the repeat. So if what happens is you really want to kind of go right up to that point where you'd go into self-oscillation, but not, because that enables the degradation to be as slow as possible. But over time, it does start to build up, and you can definitely start moving into self-oscillation. So I start usually at 1:30 or 2 o'clock on that knob, and then I just kind of keep moving it down, and the loop will just fade out. So I've got this engaged now. I'll use some effects, sometimes no effects. Let me get this back to the cello, and here we go. And then I just go to the next. Let's add one here with that effect. The overtones completely changes the sound. So right now I've just got 2 sounds, 5 or 6 notes. Let's add one more. We'll add the accordion. Just as like a low pedal. Let me get the A in there so that D isn't so abrupt. By the way, I'm doing all this in D major. All right, we've got 3 sounds. I'm just going to stick with that. Let me use the bassoon as the solo instrument, since I will not be using that during the jam. Okay, can't hear that as much. Let me try the oboe then. Tenor sax, why not? Let's see what this does. I'm just going to turn all the effects on. Not too loud. But you can hear that loop is already fading in the background. And then I'm just going to turn that down a bit so it'll fade really quickly. I'll just, actually while it's fading and I'm talking here, I'm just going to reposition everything, and let's see if we can just go right into the jam here. So you can hear that fade out, even go lower. If you turn it down all the way, it'll just play once and that's it. So now it will turn off. Go back up here, turn it on, and let's, going to get into the jam. Fade that down a little. All right, so you could tell that the things at the end, the trills with the marimba, the mandolin, and even that, it's kind of, I just smile because it's more like kind of left field, particularly once I've laid down a bunch of the other stuff and you kind of have that almost synth kind of soundscapey background, and then these things come in. But it does show that there's a lot of flexibility. I mean, you have to work with what you have. I can't turn those trills off. I could just ignore them. The sounds, that is, and oftentimes I do. But sometimes I'm like, nope, I'm gonna use every single sound. Let's just see what happens. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and good luck with your own music.